Hi everyone, welcome to the TriEssence martial art channel. Firstly, I hope everyone is still doing well and still remaining healthy, keeping a social distance, having your wits and patience about you. And I hope your country is doing better than mine. South Africa is actually doing quite badly. The local government doesn't have the manpower or the financial ability to keep a lockdown. They try to to reimburse people who are not able to work because they try to pay rent and living expense, all of that, but that's not really doing so well because the government is kind of corrupted. And eventually, they don't really have that money to go around, so instead they just allow people to, well, they basically just, uplifted the lockdown and people are allowed to work. But the problem is, the virus is not in control because during those 3 months lockdown, there were people already not abiding by the rules, so theoretically speaking, if everybody was social distance and on lockdown for 3 months, those who had the virus would already manifested and been quarantined. The rest should be free to move about. But the problem is, a lot of the people didn't abide by the rule during those 3 months. So even though the rest of us, suffered 3 months of lockdown, the problem was not contained. In fact, it didn't even get any better; it got worse. There's just more and more cases every day. I think now it's just between 3 to 5,000 new cases a day, and it's going to blow over here. So I don't really know what they're gonna do eventually. I heard that from a friend, Oxford's got some kind of vaccine in the making, so maybe that will save everyone. I'm not sure, but at the moment it's not looking very good. So I hope you guys are in a country where the government is more competent in controlling this crisis and resolving it. Over here, more and more people are getting infected, and they don't have the means to the hospital don't even have the capacity to treat everyone. It's pretty bad. And now we almost we're almost at August, and every year I usually fly back to China in the end of August, and then I stay there until the mid of November. Right? The reason I choose this time period is because that's the only period in Beijing that the weather is is sort of bearable. It's still bad, but it's more bearable than other seasons. Because over there, summer are extremely hot. It goes up to like 45 degrees, and it's very humid. So it's not just dry hotness. It's actually it's like this hot air that clings onto you. Everywhere you go, you just sweat non-stop. And of course, in winter it get really cold. So I usually go back in autumn, right? So it's like end of August, where it's still extremely hot, but after 2 or 3 weeks it get better, and then November I usually leave in like the 20th or the 21st, so that before it get too cold. That's like the most ideal period out of the year, and I try to keep it to about 3 months so that I actually can make progress. If I go there only for 2 weeks or 1 month, it's actually not enough to fix my previous problems, consolidate them, and make a progress. So yeah, so that's what I usually do. But this year I don't know if I can. At the moment, from what I hear, the South African international airport are still on shutdown, so people can't fly out. I don't know if they're gonna uplift that in the near future. And if they do, I'm not sure if the air ticket gonna be the same price, given the way South African rand, our currency, has basically plummeted quite severely against the dollar. And so the air price might actually rise by quite a bit. And also, given the current situation, I'm not sure if it's safe to travel, because an airplane is quite a small confined space with a lot of people, and you can have to wear masks and everything, but still the risk of catching the virus is quite decent. If you're flying from a country that isn't as bad as South Africa, then probably it's a lot better. But because over here the infecting rate is so high, I don't think opening the airport would be a good thing. Frankly speaking, although I really want to go back to China in the end of August, but I'm not sure if I can actually do it this year. So I'll have to see, and I'll be pretty sad. I'll be pretty upset that if I couldn't, because it kind of hinders my personal progress. But hey, this crisis is affecting everyone, whether we like it or not. I'm not the only one. So yeah, it's unfortunate. Anyway, Welcome to today's episode of Fact or Fiction, which is episode 8, part 2, where I'm still discussing about my Taichi grandmaster, Shi Ming. Now, Shi Ming is quite a personal topic for me, because he's my own grandmaster. And I think some of you, I know there are viewers that really enjoy this because they're actually interested in this whole Shi Ming lineage, or they're interested in my own Taichi lineage to know more about it. I know there are also maybe people who are not interested in this because Shi Ming is not a very famous figure per se outside of the the Taichi community in China, right? In overseas, people don't really know him that much. But other than making this content for those viewers that I know are interested in this lineage, the other main reason is to actually get my own lineages out of the way, so that because after this I'm gonna be criticizing some really famous and influential figures in the current Chinese martial art community, which I no doubt is gonna it's gonna get a lot of heat and probably generate a lot of hate. And I don't want people to point fingers and say I'm only critical towards other people. That's why I'm gonna criticize my own grandmasters first. Firstly, I did was Wu Tunan and now with Shi Ming, so that I can let people know that this series of videos is not personal. Okay, I just pick up faults I pick up things that I think are problems and mistakes, or faults or lies or incorrect claims, and I expose them. It doesn't matter whether it's my grandmaster, someone else's grandmaster. It's not about personal or personal grudge or anything to that effect. It's just exposing issues that I see in the Chinese martial art community or history. Anyway, so in my last episode, I mostly spent time explaining Shi Ming's lineage, where he got his Taichi from, and how my master went to him, and social dynamic within Shi Ming's lineage at the time where he was teaching, and how that affected his disciples, and eventually how I came to in contact with the lineage and all of that. So I haven't quite started criticizing him. Okay, so I'm gonna be doing that in this episode, and to do that, I'm gonna play part of the video that I played in the previous episode, but I'm gonna play them by portions, and then I'm going to talk about each portion, give some background knowledge of it and what I think about that part of the video. So without further ado, here we go. Okay, so what you see here is basically our Wuji stance. That is our primary training. I spent 2 hours a session doing that. And over here, what you see is called Tanhai Zhuang. And this is not part of our lineage of training. I think the camera guy just took some random footage of other people training in the park as well. So the third part is not connected to the Shi Ming lineage of Taichi. The first one that you saw is our primary training called Wuji Stang. Right now, I talked about this in the previous video. That is what Shi Ming's lineage mainly focused on when my master and Yang Jiacang, Huang Zhenhuan, Zhang Guojian came from Wu Tunan to Shi Ming. The first year they did nothing but the Wuji stance. I think in fact they did more than 1 year of just Wuji stance. And basically that's what my master required all of us to do the same, right? A lot of us, I'm like one of the younger ones that joined, I'm one of the later ones that joined the lineage, but even my senior, right, those who has been there for over 10 years, they are still doing Wuji stance. And some people, they don't understand this. They say, they all, a lot of, especially in the West, right? People tend to think, you gotta do form, you gotta, do advanced things. That is where, the secret lies. And I've had, people from Wudang, for example, that one kid I talked about in my other video, who chatted with my elder, Taichi brother, and when my Taichi brother said he only does Wuji stance every day, he's like, oh, you're wasting your time. We have this training and that training and this form and that form. So the common understanding for a lot of people is that the more you learn, the more different things you do, the better it is, and it's a better sign of progression. Okay, but in my lineage, we disagree with that. We believe that Tai Chi comes from its basic principles, the 10 principles, right? like 含胸拔背、虚灵顶、松肩坠肘、骨腰松胯. Those are the body posturing requirements, like holding the chest, bulging the back, putting the head, tucking the chin, expanding the hip, bulging the waist, etc. And then there's like 上下相随, right? The up and down synchronizing, 内外相合, synchronizing of in and out, 连绵不断, continuation without break. So the 10 principles of Taichi is what we see as the most important aspect. And so from Shi Ming passing to my master, they believe that if you struggle with these 10 principles standing still, then it's impossible for you to actually get it while moving around. So the reason we spend so much time doing Wuji stance is to actually be able to grasp those 10 fundamental principles first by not moving, by not having any distraction. And once that is achieved, then we begin doing the form, which to us is more like a test. It's like, okay, now you have the 10 principles while standing still. Can you still maintain that while moving? So the form is more like a test and also a practical preparation. Like if you can have the 10 principles while standing, can you apply it in each motion, in each move that is intended, to have its combat purpose, right? Can you generate it when you're hitting someone with this hand? Can you generate it when you blocking someone with a single whip? So those are like a test, but they're not the actual means of training. Now, I'm not saying that everyone else who's not doing this is incorrect. There are more than one ways to do this. Okay. For example, I know for a fact that in Wang Pei Sheng's lineage, they don't believe in Wuji stance. I have friends who are from that lineage, and they tell me that they only do form, which is perfectly fine. They're just two different methods. Which one is better depends on the individual, right? For some people, maybe doing the form is actually a better approach. For some people, doing stance is a better approach. So there is no universal truth to which one is better. So the one you got to think about is like you first find the constants, and then you try to apply the constants to each variable. Well, Wang Pei Sheng's lineage's method, you basically understand the constants, and you do each variable seeking the same constant. So once you see the same constant in every variable, then you naturally reach that state. So it's almost like just going on the opposite side, but eventually they should reach the same goal. And of course, last episode I did mention I was going to talk about Wang Pei Sheng's relation to Shi Ming, but I kind of forgot, so I'm going to just quickly add it in here. So there are people, the rumor, people who claim that Shi Ming learned from Wang Pei Sheng. That is incorrect. However, Shi Ming did visit Wang Pei Sheng a few times, not like a lot, but a couple of times, maybe 3 or 4 times, and discussed Taichi with him. At that time, Shi Ming hadn't reached his better level yet, so Wang Pei Sheng at the time was probably still more knowledgeable than him, so he went to discuss Taichi with him, trying to learn something, okay? And Wang Pei Sheng's personal comment on Shi Ming is that he's very 鬼. Our 鬼 in Chinese, the word means ghost. But in this case, it actually refers to him being very smart in an unusual way. It's hard to find, a synonym in English that kind of matches the word and the meaning. But so basically, when you say somebody is very 鬼, or in Chinese you call 鬼才. 鬼才is someone that is genius, but in a very unconventional way, right? 天才 is a conventional genius. 鬼才 is unconventional. So basically, Wang Pei Sheng's comment on Shi Ming is that he's very smart and he thinks in unusual ways. So they were basically talking about Taichi, and supposedly they were discussing what is Taichi, and eventually they both derived to the same agreement that Taichi is a line in the middle, right? It's not yin, it's not yang, it's a line between yin and yang. It's the part that is not moving and not still. Obviously, this is more like a philosophical thing, so I'm not going to go too deep into this. You won't understand this until you actually practice to that point and feel it in your body. Okay, it's very difficult, and I don't recommend people to try to tackle Taichi or other internal martial art from a philosophical level, because then you are detached from reality. What you think you interpret or understand from the text doesn't necessarily reflect its practical connection. So it's far better to just know about this philosophy, for example, philosophical theory, but then only really worry about it when you actually feel it in your training. Otherwise, it can actually lead you astray, right? if you try to think about something philosophical that you don't actually feel, you might interpret to be something else, and then you try to do your training seeking that incorrect understanding, and it just leads you further away from the goal. So instead, it should be a guideline, like, okay, I know that Taichi is between yin and yang, between moving and not moving, and then I just stash it aside and keep to my training. And then one day while training, that is gonna click, and that's when you merge the two. So that would be my, my recommendation to people who is doing Taichi or other internal style is don't get too focused on the philosophical things, right? Rather go through the practical training that then eventually lead you to the realization of its philosophy. Otherwise, the chance of you chasing the wrong target is quite big. Anyway, so going back to that video, so Wuji stance is our primary focus. It is basically a position where you can relax your whole body and be able to stay in that position for a very long period of time. And the reason we want to do it for a very long period of time is so that the principle eventually sticks to you, right? If you don't do stance then for a long period of time, like for us it's 2 hours a session, I do 3 sessions a day. So in China at least I have more time. So the reason we do that for so long is to force a habit so that eventually no matter what you do, you have that 10 principles with you all the time. If you don't forming a habit, then chances are when you're doing a motion, those principles are going to be gone. And furthermore, when you are attacked on the street or in a stressful situation, you have even less. So they have to sort of be grounded into your subconscious that your body is always like that. So that's the reason why I spend so much time doing stance. And of course also because the stance, the 10 principles, it's both on altering your skeletal structure, like I said in my 4 fundamental principles of internal martial art, the 4 fundamental forces of martial arts. I've talked about is skeletal reconstruction. So if you don't spend a lot of time doing it, you can't alter the way your joints are functioning, right? So that's another reason why it takes so long. And obviously thirdly is because, especially for newcomers, you have very tense muscle, especially on the shoulder, right? For people who work on the computer, work on in front of this, the shoulder get very tense. So doing it for excessive long period of time is also there to help you relax these muscles, right? You basically have to reach a point where your body is so worn out that they no longer have the strength to be tense. Only then will you be able to realize what's relaxation. So those are all reasons why in our lineage we emphasize so much on the Wuji stance. And of course, we don't just stand there and do nothing. There are various mental trainings, various body training, controlling various joints, but those come later on, and you can't really see it because they are very minor internal motions. But by internal motion, I don't mean qi or energy. I mean, sure, my master would explain it with qi and energy because that's just how they were taught, so they explain it in that kind of context. But if we're gonna look at the more modernized, physics perspective, we're basically just manipulating our joints in a very subtle way that is not obvious when you look from a third-person perspective. So internal movement is not hocus pocus energy. If you watch my video on what is qi, then you know that we believe qi is blood. So in that case, yes, the blood are involved, but what is actually moving other than blood flowing is the joint. Okay, there is small joint motion that we practice when doing that. And the second part that you saw is called Tanhai Zhuang, the one where the lady is reaching down, right, and coming back up. So Tanhai in Chinese literally means to reach for the ocean. So Tanhai Zhuang is basically a stance where you reach, right? Wuji means it's a state before Taichi, so when everything is not differentiated from yin and yang, right? When yin and yang is mixed into one, you can also call it the chaotic energy, but in Chinese it's not really chaos, it's just unidentified. I think that's a better term. So it's an unidentified state. So that's Wuji. We do Wuji in order to find Taichi, to find yin and yang, and to achieve yin yang separation. Tanhai Zhuang is basically a motion training. So when Grandmaster Shi Ming first started these exercises, Wuji represents the stillness, and Tanhai represents the motion. So you have one that is still stance, one you have a motion stance. But passing down to my master, he no longer believes in Tanhai Zhuang, so none of us do Tanhai Zhuang. We only do Wuji style. We've asked him before, myself and our other Taichi brothers. My mother just said that he found that Tanhai Zhuang is unnecessary. So we know how to do it, but we just don't spend time doing it. But when I go to the park, I do see other members of our lineage, right? Like that Wang Laoshi, the old Chinese lady. She does a lot of Tanhai Zhuang, and others as well. In fact, I think I've seen that old lady in the video sometime in the park too. I'm not sure the same lady, because she looks much older now, but it could be the same lady. So we don't do that anymore, but other members from our lineage, they still do. And also, just on a side note, my Taichi brother, who've been doing more than 10 years with my master, obviously, they're not always dedicated, they're on and off, they're musicians, so they have to go to tours and rehearsals, so they're not constantly doing it, but still, they've been doing it for more than 10 years. And for them, my master will still say that, when they come to the park, the first thing they do is 2 hours of Wuji stance before they are permitted to do form. And, my master will say that if you only have 2 hours today to train, you do the stance. You only do form after you completed at least minimum 2 hours of stance. So that is how important stance is in our lineage. And like I said just now, that third part, where the lady's doing some arm thing on a very low stance, that's no Tai Chi at all. I don't know who that is. I think the camera guy just kind of randomly found someone and thought it was cool, so he taped it and included it. Alright, moving on to the next part.
That it can be felt and manipulated, then perhaps you can see why some Chinese go one step further. They call this teacher Master Shi, and he tells his new students, come here every morning at dawn for 3 years, and then I'll know you're serious.
3 years? Right, and that's just the beginning?
Yes, but I'm warning you, Bill.
Okay, so the next part I've talked about in the previous video already. That's basically 如意通背 singular hand exercises. We call it 单操手. But Grandmaster Shi is basically teaching it with Tai Chi quality, and he's trying to get the student to reach Tai Chi principles while doing Tongbei exercises, which is possible. And again, there are still people that I see when I go to the park that does these exercises or that one. But again, my master no longer believes in that. He doesn't teach it. We don't do it. And again, we've asked him about it, and he just thinks that those are all the distractions. He's saying Wuji stance is all you need to reach those the 10 principles. You don't need those exercises. And like I said in the previous video, Grandmaster Shi probably taught it so that the students have something extra to practice. If you just tell everybody to come and stand there all day, all morning, and then people, chances are a lot of them are gonna leave. And that's pretty much what happens in my lineage, right? Whenever there's new people coming, there's maybe 70-80% chance they're not gonna stay after a week because it's just so boring, right? They come here, they stand there, and then we all just stand there, and yeah, it's very hard. It's not for everyone. In fact, one of the better trained Taichi brothers in my lineage at the moment, right? One who currently have the best training at the moment is Guojian. It's a guy with like a Jamaican dreadlock. Yeah, he actually told me when we're chatting that when he first came here, he just wanted to do Tai Chi because he thought that it will add to his musicians. He wanted to be a culture man, right? In Chinese, 文化人. So he thinks that he's a reggae musician. He has a band. It's quite well known in the reggae community in China, and he goes to to Europe and stuff for Strawberry Music Festival and stuff like that. So he felt that he's a musician and he wanted to have more culture. So and doing Tai Chi makes you a cultured man. That's why he wanted to do Tai Chi. He came to my masters through some friends' introduction, and yeah, he didn't like the stance training either. But you see, he thought that everywhere he goes, people all gonna do the same thing. That's the only reason why he didn't leave. He thought, okay, I already did stance here for like a week. If I go somewhere else, I'm gonna have to start from zero again. So I might just stay here and keep doing this. So if he knew that in other places, in other teachers, they're gonna teach him the form, he will most likely leave and not stay here. So. But as fate has it, he stayed, and he actually are now one of the has the furthest progression out of all of us. So he's actually pretty decent in his training. So that shows you that how difficult it is to keep students when you're only teaching stance practice. My master doesn't care because he's not making a profit out of this, and he's not trying to build a massive group of students. So he sort of has the mentality that he only teaches people who want to do this, and the people who don't want to do this, they're welcome to go, right? He doesn't want to waste his time. But obviously for Grandmaster Shi, it's a different story. He doesn't charge people for it, as far as I know. Maybe he did to some people. My master, he didn't charge him. But he wanted to build a better group of people, right? Because he kind of got kicked out from Wang Yongquan's lineage. So he sort of have this grudge, not grudge, but like he wanted to show them that he can do well without them. So he needed to build a substantial group. So that's why he needed to teach them other exercises. Not single exercises are pointless completely, but you can pretty much skip them. And to my master's understanding, they are more of a distraction than a progression. But of course, the people who actually do them are not wrong. It just is taking another approach. There are more than one approach to reach the same goal.
What's going on here?
Master Shi will tell you he just used qi to throw his student.
This is where a lot of the Chinese stories come of all the...
Because the next part of the video, we're gonna start to, we've reached the woo-woo part, right? The part that is highly controversial. So the first thing that you saw here, where he's touching the fist, and the guy suddenly getting like spasms, and then get pushed out. That only works on certain individuals, okay? So the guy in the blue tracksuit, he's not faking it, okay? He does feel something that spasms himself, but that does not work on everyone. That's important to understand, and therefore it is not a combat application. If anyone who claims this is how you fight, they're talking nonsense, okay? Now this is a very strange phenomenon. I would say there are people who are naturally born and are sensitive to this kind of qi or force or whatever you want to call it. The people who are just naturally born that are sensitive to it, and there are people who are born that are not sensitive to it. And a lot of people who are not sensitive through training can become sensitive. And there are also ones who just can't become sensitive. Whether it's a physical limitation or they simply don't believe it, I'm not sure. But so there are different type of people. So what I can say is that if I were to meet Grandmaster Shi in real life and he does that to me, I would not spasm like that. With that said, if I do something similar with my master, he can do something that will make my balance go off. Like I'll push against his hand, then all of a sudden I'll start to tiptoe. Okay, I wouldn't like spasm, but I would like leaning forward. It's like my force is going into his arm through his hand, but without him obviously pulling back, because that is everybody can do that. And obviously, if I'm pushing against someone's hand and he moves back, I'm gonna move back too, because I can feel the sudden retraction of his limb. I'm gonna pull back too, and nothing will happen. That is why trying to pull somebody back, moving your limb is not actually practical in any practical sense, right? It doesn't work on people who are aware and who have decent reflex on these things. However, what my master does, or at least how I feel, is that I'm pushing against his hand. It feels like he's constantly pushing against me, so I can't just retract. If I retract, he's gonna push further into my space. But when I'm pushing against his force, my force is constantly getting drawn into him. So it's very weird to explain, but the result is that I will start to tiptoe. And at that point usually is when he sends another force that sends me out. So that in Taichi is basically what we talk about, which is 接换拿发, right? 接 is contact, 换 is the my incoming force that's when I feel it's going into his arm rather than just pushing here. 拿 is when my feet goes tiptoe, and 5 is when he sends the force back. Well, I don't have balance and resistance, and then that's when he sends me back. So when I go back, it doesn't come purely from the force he's generating at me, but is his force plus the fact that I'm actually unbalanced. So something does happen to the person's balance when they have this contact, but not exaggerated as this. Now, I have seen people, in current time in the park who have similar response. Not to my master. My master doesn't actually do these things with people who are not his disciples, but I've seen this done by other students of Grandmaster Shi Ming, and they students have similar response. So basically, there are people who does this, but it doesn't work on everyone. So don't take this at face value. There is some kind of force that Grandmaster Shi Ming here is demonstrating, but the effect that you see from the force is overly exaggerated by people who are sensitive to this kind of force.
Martial art masters, they could emit energy, and it wasn't just their physical force that beat their opponents, it was their chi.
Okay, now the next part, again, I've seen this done with, from other people like Xiao Zhao, right? He's also a student from Grandmaster Shi Ming, so I've seen him does that to his student. And again, if Grandmaster Shi Ming or Xiao Zhao do it to me, I'm not gonna have that kind of reaction. Okay, basically when your feet lift off the ground and you completely you going over this way, right? Your balance kind of goes like that. I will not have that response. I know that for a fact. But there are times where because my master doesn't do this kind of demo, because this kind of it's just a pure demo. There's no purpose to it, right? What my master like to do is let me grab his wrist, so he's got two hands out like this, and it's pretty much what you see when I demonstrate in my own video. That's how my master like to demonstrate things. So I'll hold his wrist and I'll hold him down, and I'll be using a lot of force. Especially when I first went there, right? I did many years of each one, so I had the structural force that I'll hold him down, and he'll basically do something, and my feet would lift off the ground, not like exaggerated. I don't go like this or like other crazy bounces, but my feet do get off the ground, and I'll basically hop back. And I've explained that in my video on the introduction to authentic Taichi. Why I hop is because I keep my body structure as one solid thing. So when the force comes, it moves together. If your body is not connected in one structure like we do in each one, any other internal martial art, you wouldn't hop. You basically your body would kind of wherever it's not connected, like if it's your waist, your hips, or your chest, it will basically fall back. But if everything is connected, your body will hop. So there is something real in this, but not in the way it was demonstrated. Okay, I know for a fact that I can't overpower my master. And now I've done. We basically play around with this among my own Taichi brothers, like especially the senior ones like Guo Guojian, Li Jin, Zhang Wei. Those are the more senior ones. So we do play around too, and I can say that none of them can overpower me. So if I use structural force, I hold in the same way like I did with my master. They can't push me back, or they can't make my feet go off the ground, but my master can. So there's definitely something there that is real, okay? But again, just like the previous portion of the video, what you see in this one is overly exaggerated.
我用的是和谐的办法，我给它合上。好，我这里是一个我，那是一个舌头，那分开。就是我的那个意念上那个地方去了。行。我的意念上那个去以后，我这个地方那个是我的石子，这是我的躯子，我这也不使劲儿，就产生这种状态。
对，这个不用力，
不用力，没有用力，太极不用力的。
对，没有发我，我明白。
啊，发我是没有发我没有用力，我不是这么正发不动。这个我也告诉他，我是用那个思想，我的意念一动，我的意念是一种能量，一种东西在。
你做这个的时候，你有什么感觉？多说是热的感觉还是电的感觉？没有感觉。
没有感觉。
所以没有感觉是什么？
太阳拉着地球转的时候，你有什么感觉呢？这个地磁场你有什么感觉呢？你没有感觉的，因为它有一种平衡感。你别看老师隔着你打我，
来，
那就是你就他先退，然后你就棒他，实际上他就是对着。
I don't. Look at his hand. His hand trembles when he does that.
Okay, so in the next part, we see Grandmaster Shi Ming do the same demonstration again, but he also then attempt to explain it. Like he said, he have himself here, and he's sort of thinking, his mental projections over there, and that's why the person is acting so weird, right? The spasm. Firstly, I'm gonna say don't take that seriously because Grandmother Shi Ming is famous for not revealing things to outsiders, even not to some of his own students that he aren't favoring, like, not the disciple. He keep information, so he most certainly is not going to, to disclose how he does it to an outsider on a video documentary. And secondly, even if he were to explain it, I would doubt his ability to explain because, simply for the fact that he isn't an expert in physics or science or any of that kind of field. So what he experienced and what really happened may differ quite a bit. Now, obviously, the same goes for the, for his students. Also, when the white guy asked him like, "What do you feel?" and he said, "He doesn't feel anything. It's just like when the moon, when the sun and Earth, when the Earth gravitates around the sun, we don't feel anything." Well, first of all, that's not true. We do feel something. We just don't, it's just not as obvious as gravity. And secondly, if he's not feeling anything, why is he going to spasm, right? That kind of unnatural behavior most certainly means he is feeling something. So one of the common problem of that age and even of today is that a lot of these martial art practitioners, they try to pretend to be physics expert without actually studying physics at school. And even if you study at high school, college level, it might not be enough to really know what's going on. So, which is why in my videos when I say, when I mention anything about physics, I always say that this is how I feel it could happen. I don't say this is exactly physics behind it. So in this case, obviously his physics is completely wrong, and I don't think he's not feeling anything at all, but somehow warrant that kind of reaction. So a lot of these, you can just ignore them as mumbo jumbo. They're actually trying to make it sound more scientific, but failing. And also they actually are further mystifying this whole phenomenon, okay? The bottom line is, it works on some people, it doesn't work on others. Same goes for where Grandmaster Shi Ming is doing it, over the white person's hand to still affect the student, right? That does work when the recipient is sensitive to this kind of force or sensitivity or whatever you want to call it. He has been known to do this a lot of time, where he would have a bystander stand in the middle, and they will still work on the people receiving it. But obviously, it doesn't work on people who can't receive, who are not sensitive, which is why he isn't showing it on the white person. It's also why he doesn't show it on every bystander, because he knows that it doesn't work on everyone.
But that goes against everything we know and understand in Western science. It defies the biophysical laws.
This is where Chinese medicine takes a wide turn off of what we understand.
Okay, next we get to the most controversial part, and the elephant in the room, which is the no touch thing. I mean, he does something with touching, but there are also people who come without touching, and they also kind of, either fall sideways or they, get uprooted, etc. So yeah, so we finally got to the part that everyone criticized him about. And the answer is the same as the previous segment, right? It works on some people, it doesn't work on others. For example, I've heard about this from my dad when he went to visit him in the 80s. He said that they can affect people without touching them, and I always thought that that's something really cool. And if that is possible, that would trump over any other contacted martial art, because you can simply defeat someone without even touching them. But when I first went to my master in 2008, and I asked him about in China you call it 凌空力, right? 凌空means to 凌空 means through air. So also 凌空力 means a force that you don't have to touch, it can go through air. So when I met my current master in 2008, I asked him about Lin Kong Li, and he just told me that it's a game. It's not serious, and it's not for practical reasons. Now, in the beginning, I thought maybe he was holding back on me. Maybe he doesn't want to expose it. But as I spend more years with him, then I realized that he's saying the truth. It doesn't work on everyone, which is why my master doesn't demonstrate that. He doesn't teach that. He doesn't claim to do that, and he doesn't he doesn't want anything to do with it. But there are still students of his, like my Taichi brothers and sisters, that can feel it from him. But he never want them to feel it or try to show off by doing it. So that's basically our lineage's stance on what this whole no touch chi power is. It's something that doesn't work on everyone, so therefore it has no practical purpose. So then some of you might wonder, I have been asked this many times in the past, then why does Grandmaster Shi Ming keep doing these demos? So there are basically two possible reasons. Firstly, it's for vanity, okay? If you have a big crowd and you do no touch demo, it just pleases the crowd a lot more than when you're showing them genuine things. It's just like if I used to do demo back in the days when I was younger. It's far more impressive to the crowd if I do aerial cartwheels, the contemporary wushu forms and 360s and those kind of stuff, than if I show them a traditional form, which people would lose interest in the first 10 seconds. So vanity definitely plays a huge part, and I can't say I agree with that. I wouldn't do it if I'm in his place, but I do see why he does it, right? Because it brings in more crowd and it gives him more reputation. But obviously I don't think it's right. Although I'm not in a position to judge my grandmaster, but I wouldn't agree with him on that. And secondly, Shi Ming is also, like I say, famous for holding secrets. So he doesn't want to show the real stuff to the crowd. First of all, because the crowd will not appreciate it, but also because he doesn't want his competitors to see what he is capable of, right? In that way, when someone do end up pushing hand with him, they don't know what to expect, because they're going to be expecting these no touch chi stuff like Lin Kong Li, but then they will be surprised by his actual skill, which is why not only does he not show those in public with a massive crowd, he also doesn't really talk about them except to people that he are close to, or people who that knows him, or people who that practice push hand with him. Most of the people who've seen Shi Ming do stuff, who've been to his demonstrations, they have no idea what his real skill are. So, and we're gonna talk about that, but in the other later point. Now, another question that people commonly ask is why does he, why do people actually do this with him if they know it doesn't work? So the simple fact is, some of them don't, right? Some of them, because they can feel it. If something is real to yourself, then you think it must be real to everyone, right? That's how our mentality usually works. We judge everything based on how our own experience feels. If we feel that today is hard, we will expect everyone else to feel it's hard too. But obviously, everything that we experience are relative to the individual. So what we feel doesn't equate to what others feel. So that's the first thing. A lot of his disciples, they really think it's real because they physically feel it. And it's not like, some people suspect or suggest that it's just student being polite and playing along with the master. I can tell you with certainty that's not the case. It may be the case for other people, but that's definitely not the case for Grandmaster Shi Ming. His disciples really do feel that, okay? For example, we take example on Shou Yijia, the half Russian, half Chinese, guy whose father was a famous author. He actually went on to a television program from a Beijing TV station, and when he was talking about his experience with Taichi, he actually says that one day he was training under Shi Ming, and then one day Shi Ming asked him to give him a punch, and he says that he actually gave a pretty hard punch because he completely trusts Shi Ming's ability, and he said that before his punch touches Shi Ming, like maybe about this far much away, just the distance, his entire body rotated and he fell on his back without ever touching Shi Ming, which is a similar response, right? When you rotate that way to the guy in blue, or just now standing there in a bow stance punching pose, and when Shi Ming hit his hand, he also kind of flew upwards, where the waist goes up and hit toes forward. So Xiao Weijia had a similar experience, and it happened to him twice without touching Shi Ming. Now, first of all, it's very hard to fake that, to fake throwing a punch and then lift yourself up and fall on your back. And second of all, I'm not sure if people actually want to fake that, because over there it's pretty, it's rock floor, so it's not like there's cushions or mattresses, and normally you will have this, your subconscious there to protect yourself. It wouldn't let you fall like that to get hurt. And obviously, if that's all he's doing all the time, I don't see why he would stay with Shi Ming for all those years. And then then go to a TV program and talk about it. So I do believe that some people really believe it to be true. I have this one Taichi sister in our lineage who are very, very sensitive, and she feels it from everyone, right? It's not even just a master, right? When people are sensitive, they can feel this from a lot of people who trains Tai Chi. It's not just from a very high leveled one. Obviously I would say she will feel more strongly, when she's doing stuff interactive with my own master, but she can feel it from my Tai Chi brothers like Li Jing, Guo Jie, all of them. She can feel it, but it doesn't mean that everyone else can feel it. But to her, this is as real as it is, and I've tried to tell her that it doesn't work on everyone. That Lin Kong Li is not really a practical approach to martial art, and she wouldn't care, because for her it is as real as anything could get. And so out of Shi Ming's the disciple, my master is not into this. Zhang Guojian, he's not into this, but the other elder Taichi brother for them, Huang Zhenhuan, he's really into this. He actually broke out and made his own lineage of Tai Chi called Da Dao Tai Chi. Some people didn't like that, but my master and Zhang Guojian didn't really care, because they have a close relationship way back to back in the days with Wu Tunan. Anyway, so he is pretty much into this thing, and he does this all the time, and his student does this all the time too. I'm gonna play a video clip of Huang Zhenhuan, so you can see what I'm talking about.
是不是点空？不是空的这个到了吗？就是空的味儿，你看它，这搭的还很好的，很沉的，很舒服的。我说啊，这，这是心理本身嘛，能量能反应，能反射，这个虚无一下子啪就出来了，这个能量这么能量，这样看，我这个特满的东西啊，特满的。所以这样了以后吧，我跟他这个啊，球放出去了吧？对。就往里头再打。
So what he's showing in this video is what he calls 神打, right? There are basically two different definitions for 神打 that you shouldn't confuse with. One version of 神打 is referring to Chinese native cultish religious kind of practice where they supposedly invoke ancient warrior spirits that possesses them, and then they're supposed to have supernatural powers. The whole boxing rebellion was initially based on this kind of belief that they can be immune to bullets because they're possessed by some ancient deity or warrior spirit. So that's a different kind of shenda completely. Okay, that's still being practiced in the South, but for me that's not martial art. It is cult practice. In this other definition of shenda, it means to strike somebody's shen. Right. In my other video on explaining shen, we talk about shen is awareness. So up here, basically, supposedly, Huang Zhenhuan is basically projecting his energy of qi to strike somebody's conscious or awareness, and it gives them kind of like a shock or a scare, and that's why their body goes bouncing, or they run back, and they were like shouting or exhaling to release the stress and pressure. So I've always wanted to try this with Huang Zhenhuan, but I can't because it would be kind of awkward. Like I said, to my master, he's only close to Zhang Guojian and Huang Zhenhuan. So if I show up to Huang Zhenhuan's place, ask you to show me that, which I undoubtedly believe will not work on me because it doesn't work on everyone, and I'm particularly have this, I'm naturally born with the ability to shut these things off, so it doesn't affect me at all. it'll be really awkward, which will make my master look bad. So I don't really want to try this on Huang Zhenhuan. However, I do know that he has a student who broke off from him and ran his own separate group now in another place called Beihang, which is like the Beijing space program, the Beijing space organization's staff quarter. They basically built a whole community where the people who work for Beihang, the Beijing space organization, where the staff member live, right? And I know that this is one of Huang Zhenhuan's previous student is teaching there, and I've been trying to basically go there and try it out on him, but unfortunately last year when I was there we couldn't get the time to match. Because he goes there either on a Saturday or Sunday. On Sundays I go to train with my master. Saturday sometimes my master goes to the park and I go as well. When he doesn't, I try to go there to find this guy, but so far I haven't got luck. Maybe next time I go back I'm gonna try it and hopefully capture it on video. But for me, I don't believe for a second that it will work on me, right? It's just something that I will do to prove the point that doesn't work on me. And back to the previous question where people ask like, why do people keep doing it if it doesn't work? Firstly, for them, like I said, they feel real. And secondly, a lot of them, in my experience, when you point out to them that it's not real, they don't really care. You see, the thing is, let's make this into a sci-fi analogy, right? Or sci-fi comparison. So if we imagine that fighting or self-defense is a form of communication, okay? Then normally people communicate with their fist, with their physical body. You punch, you kick, you throw, you choke, or all kind of stuff to people to get your message across, to communicate. For these people, they're basically communicating on another level, okay? And to them, they're communicating on a higher plane. Imagine that we as humans talk with our vocal cord, okay? And maybe there's like an alien race that communicate telepathically. They don't need to talk. And to them, communicating telepathically is a far superior way than talking with voice, with a vocal cord. And they don't need to do it, and maybe for a long period of time they're not using their voice. They don't have a vocal cord anymore thanks to evolution, for example. And if you ask them to go back to talking with a vocal cord, they would refuse. That's the kind of mindset a lot of these practitioners have, that they believe that they've basically reached a next level of self-defense where they don't need to touch people. Obviously, in the grand scheme of things, it fails as a means to self-defense because it doesn't work on people who are not on the same plane of communication, so to speak, right? People who are not in the group of, who are not sensitive cannot be affected, and therefore it isn't an effective way of self-defense. But for them, they simply don't care because they believe they've elevated themselves to a next level. So their goal isn't really to self-defense, but to chase something that in their mind is a higher elevation of mind and body and being, right? They basically are reaching a higher being to themselves. That's what they feel towards other people. They actually look down on the people who fight with their hand and feet and think that those are primitive, right? They are far better in the sense of the evolution curve. So that's another reason why they don't really care when you tell them it doesn't work, or even when you can convince them, right? Like I've had people who claim that they can do this and it doesn't work on me, and they end up getting pushed out instead, and they still don't drop it because they still have this attachment to this idea that they're at a higher level of understanding than the people who use their physical body. Just like if communication is the goal, then aliens who telepathically communicate pretty much failed on the purpose of communication if they can't talk to us with our vocal cord. Obviously, that's assuming that they can't telepathically communicate with us. But obviously, if we don't have the recipient to receive that kind of mental brainwave or whatever, then then they can't communicate with us. So just to give you an idea of why there's so many people who, even though they realize it doesn't work on everyone, they still pursue this. That is the reason. Now the next question that people might want to ask is then why there are so many of them at each of the Taichi masters or Chi masters that do this, and why there's so many of the sensitive people who go there. Where do they find them from, right? Where do they get all of these guys to join? So first of all, you don't need to train to be sensitive. Some people get sensitive after training. Others get sensitive by birth. It's like, some people are born with it, some people are not. So that's the first point. Secondly, when you are sensitive, then naturally you tend to seek out these kind of practices, whether it's religion, cult belief, or Taichi, or Qigong. People who are sensitive naturally seek out for these things, which is why they would eventually end up in one of these Qi masters classes and start doing that thing, right? The people with like mind tend to meet and congregate. So that's how things work. For example, I basically every second year I teach a workshop in St. John. It's a pristine high school or primary school to high school, I think, in Johannesburg in South Africa. So every second year they have an art fest, and I always get invited there to do a workshop on Tai Chi. And this one year that I went there, I met one of the students that attended my workshop who are very sensitive. Okay, because obviously I don't teach these kind of things. I talk about the actual physics and the physical aspect of Tai Chi. And when I asked for someone to come up so I can demonstrate, he was the most eager. So he come up naturally because he's into these things. That way he wanted to come up and experience. And I basically showed him. You've seen it in my previous videos on Tai Chi, where he pushed on my chest and I showed him how I can concave the chair, relax, just put my sword on the back, up and down, and how that even though he's pushing me, but I can resist his force a lot better than if I tense up the chest, stick it out, and push him on the point of contact. So that all went well, but afterwards, after the workshop, he came to me and he says that when I did that, he felt a massive warmth that that radiated from my body, and he firmly believed that I'm emitting energy and chi, and nothing I say can convince him otherwise. You see, like even if I don't want to go into that area, he's convinced I can, and he wants to learn that. He doesn't want to learn the physical side of Tai Chi, but he wants to learn the energy side. So you see, that's how a lot of these people's mentality works. I've met another student that I teach for a short while who's like a high up in one of the telecommunication companies in South Africa. He was introduced by a guy from Huawei. He's basically the Huawei guy's client. So the Huawei guy called me up and said his client want to do Tai Chi. He's a very important client, and I should really help him to give a good impression. Anyway, so he's like an older gentleman. He's like 40s or 50s. And in the first class as well, right? I was trying to explain to him how when you're relaxing and yielding, it doesn't mean you move your hand back. You can basically hold out your hand, but not fight on the point, like I've explained in the video on the separation of yin and yang in Tai Chi. And again, instead of just feeling that he can't push my hand as well as when I'm tensed up, he actually felt that his body is falling downwards. Like suddenly he's leaning forward and falling down. His heels came up. Now at the time, I know that my training at the time was nowhere near the ability of my master. I can't make an average person tiptoe, but he tiptoed, right? And that again means that he is sensitive by birth. He's never done any martial art, qigong, or tai chi training prior, but he was able to sense a lot more than average people. So there are definitely people who are naturally born with this, and they tend to look out for these things. But with that said, I'm gonna reiterate and I'm gonna stress this again, that these are not indication of actual Tai Chi ability when it comes to self-defense. Okay, having this kind of thing is more to do with the recipient, the person who's giving you the force or sensing your force. It speaks more about their sensitivity than your ability. Okay, someone who's really sensitive can sense this in almost all the Tai Chi brothers that we train together. But but very few can actually no one can actually do this to people who doesn't sense it at all. So any demo like this it speaks more on the recipient being more sensitive than usual than the one who's applying the force being high skill, right? It's not about their skill, it's about the receiving end ability of sensing this force. And in case you're wondering, why this is even a thing in Tai Chi, well, it is not a thing that we develop on purposely. It's more like as you train, it just kind of manifests itself. Okay, we don't every day sit there and try to send somebody's force or chi. That's not the goal of training. At least not in my lineage. It just kind of it's more like a byproduct. As you train, it happens. And in case you wonder, what's the point of this? Obviously, to some degree, if you're more sensitive to incoming force, you're able to pick that force up a lot quicker. So upon contact, in the real situation, you're able to read an incoming force just a split second faster than an average person. And that split second is going to make the difference whether you can prepare and, parry, counter, or evade that strike than people who are split second later that can't feel it. Now, obviously, normally you would either use your eyes to react to whatever your opponent's doing, or use the skin. Right? Eye doesn't work when you get close up. So naturally, most of other martial arts, Taichi included, they use sensitivity of the skin when you get close up. But obviously, for these people, they can be even a step further. They can sense your intention almost like, even without sufficient skin contact. And this, I've experienced this, right? Some of my Taichi brother, a few, like Guojian and Li Jin, they can sense my intention to strike them just before I actually make the move. However, it doesn't mean that they can naturally evade that attack. That actually comes from combat experience. Someone who is sensitive but have no combat experience, they wouldn't know what to do with this information. So I will still hit them because I'm faster than them. But if assuming two persons have the same level of combat skill and reaction time, then being more sensitive does give a slight edge. So that's one thing. A second thing, it is there to help teach students. So basically, if there's a new student who's doing something, and someone who is sensitive goes and check on his practice, he are more likely to pick up his mistakes than someone who are less sensitive. So it's not about combat or affecting other people. It's about actually helping your fellow, either students or Taichi brothers, sisters, to progress better, right? So like in my lineage, when my master is busy or not there, then like Li Jin, Guojian, the senior disciples would then help the newcomers and the junior disciples on the training. And if they touch while I'm doing Wuji stance, if they touch my arm, like my hand, they will be able to tell me, like if my waist hasn't relaxed enough or if my hips are not expanding enough. They can pick up all these. They can pick up a lot more detail than if I were to test on the newcomer. Not saying that I can't sense anything at all, but for them, it's much more obvious. Maybe it take me 10 seconds to pick up something, but for them it will take like 1 second. The moment they touch, sometimes they don't even need to touch. They walk in their proximity and they can already tell your joints in this particular part of your spine is hard or is stuck. Things like that. And obviously, if we are in a push hand situation, this part I can do. I can't sense as extreme as them, but in a push hand situation or in a combat situation that you are engaged in a close quarter, I can sense which part of his elbow, if his elbow is tensing, if his shoulder is tensing, or if his back is tensing, where the root of his force is coming from, right? The origin of the force that I'm going against, and therefore I can make a plan to do something about it. In Taichi we call it seizing, right? 接换拿发 contact, dissolve, seizing. Seizing largely depend on you knowing where the root of his force is. It's not always on his center of balance. So that's another benefit of being sensitive. So that is why it is not bad to develop sensitivity. Just don't be fooled by it, right? Don't believe that you've unlocked supernatural power. It doesn't work like that. And even though my senior Taichi brothers, they are the one who check everybody, but when they need to test something, they test it on me because I'm not sensitive. So if they can affect me with whatever they're doing, that means they are on the right track. If they can affect each other, it doesn't prove much. Well, it doesn't prove any progression, right? Because they can already affect each other because they're sensitive. But if I'm holding them down and they can yank me off the floor or push me back, that means if basically they training are going towards a point where it can be applied in practice again, or in a practical situation. So they all like to test the their power and stuff on me rather than anybody else, because they can't actually test us among each other because they're also too sensitive to this force, and therefore will give an unrealistic response. I'm the only one who actually would hold them down. Like they will do some force, and to each other they will all move back. And when I come and clamp them down, then they can't get it out, and then they know, okay, they're missing this part. The elbow is not sinking enough, or the shoulder blades are not expanding enough. But it helps them to pick up what they're missing at that point. So it goes both ways. Being sensitive has its merit in guiding people to train, but having solid structure kind of helps them to test their ability, whether it's ready for the real situation. And so obviously it's not only just the no-touch stuff that requires sensitive people. The foundational level of other forces, it also has more effect on people who are sensitive than people who are not sensitive. Okay, so you basically have to find that metaphysical aspect and combine it with your actual body structure, skeleton, to make it work on people who are resisting you. If you only have the metaphysical aspect, then it only works on people who can attune into that same frequency. So to speak, it does not work on outsiders, which is why a lot of these demos, you see these Taichi masters doing demo really well on their students, but when an outsider approaches them, it falls apart completely. For example, one day, it's like, I think it was 2 years ago or 3 years ago, I can't remember exactly. On the day I'm gonna fly back to South Africa, that morning I still went to train with my master in Bamboo Park for one last session. It was my master's birthday, so he left early, and then I got my luggage in my Taichi brother Li Jin's car in his trunks. So we were gonna train until like 4 o'clock, and then we'll go to the airport straight away. So during our training, when my master was gone, another Taichi uncle came to the venue. He also basically trained under grandmaster Shi Ming, and he was starting to criticize us and saying, we're not doing this right, not doing that right, and we need to project our swords like here and there. And he started showing on one of my Taichi sisters there, like you see now I'm holding, you can't do nothing, but you think about that, you put your mind over here, then he will be affected. And he's like, see now I'm moving back, and through the whole time I basically wasn't very happy with him because he's stepping his boundaries. He's like disrespecting my master even though he's not there. So I gave him like a very bad facial expression, and he picked up on that. He turned around to me and he said, if you don't believe it, you're welcome to try. So he held out his hands, and I hold his hand. So we know that what's gonna happen is I'm gonna push him on his wrist, and he's gonna try to dissipate my force. And as a result, I pushed him right. He tried to do something, but it doesn't work on me because I'm not attuned to that sensitivity. Instead, I pushed him all the way back, and he hit his back on a pillar. And after that, he kind of was very upset, and he's like, I only was able to do that because he couldn't strike me. And I was like, I hold both your wrists. How are you gonna strike me with your head? Don't be stupid. And he came and tried to poke my eyes. It's like a typical thing in the Chinese martial art world. But obviously, I slapped it away. He tried to kick my balls. I slapped it away. And I was like, look, right, if you want to do fighting, I've been fighting, for a very long time, and I'll kick your ass. Well, not exactly in that words, but something similar. And at that time, my Taichi brother came back. He went to basically buy some coffee. And he came back, and then he diffuses the situation, and the guy left. And from what I hear, he never came back to this venue for over a year. So that just shows you that even people from my master generation, a lot of them don't realize that what they do or what they think is real doesn't work on everyone, and they're under the illusion that the mental stuff, the metaphysical things, it basically translates to real ability, but it doesn't. It's only part of the equation. Without the physical structure, the bone skeleton, opening of joint, tendons, all those stuff that I talk about in my videos, the 4 fundamental forces, then the metaphysical things is empty. It's like a ghost, right? Without a human body, it doesn't materialize. It doesn't affect things. If you ever believe in ghosts, it's just a comparison. So there are a lot of people who are trapped in this delusion, and they don't realize that it doesn't work on people who are not attuned to this kind of sensitivity. Alright, so due to the time constraint, I'm going to end this episode right here. in this episode, we basically discussed the more controversial part of Grandmaster Shi Ming. And also from this whole episode, I hope that all of you have a better understanding on what works on everyone, what works on some people, why they still believe in the no-touch Qi or the other aspect, metaphysical aspect of Taichi when it doesn't work on everyone. So I hope that all of you have a better understanding on what really goes on, right? So you don't either believe it blindly like some people do, and you don't bash it without cause, as some of the other extreme side of the spectrum, where there are people who bash these practices completely and believe that they are without any merit at all. So hopefully through this episode, you have a more balanced and factual understanding and outlook to this kind of phenomenon. Now in the next video, which will be the Fact or Fiction Part 3 on Grandmaster Shi Ming, I'm then going to talk about what was his actual capability, what can he actually do that impresses practitioners, right? So far we've looked at stuff that impresses outsiders and bystanders and people who doesn't actually know martial art, but he also has a very good reputation among Taichi practitioners in Beijing's martial art community, and which would then suggest that he has genuine skill that he can use and defeat others in push hand and other confrontation. So the next episode we're going to look at what are those qualities from his Taichi. So hope you have enjoyed this video, and if you do, please subscribe me on YouTube channel so you'll be updated whenever I upload a new video. Got any questions and comments, you're welcome, or suggestions for future content, you're welcome to leave in the comment section below, and I'll get back to you. And also, if your suggestion is viable, I'll definitely make a plan for near future. And if you can, please support me on Patreon. That will help me greatly in making these good quality videos on a more regular basis. And lastly, hope everyone will still stay safe, stay in your house, stay social distanced, and all the best for the near future, wherever this crisis is going to take us and whenever it's going to finish. Oh yes, and lastly, I'm going to give a shout out to Thomas and Robin. I'm not going to pronounce your surname because I have no idea how to pronounce it. I don't want to butcher the pronunciations. Thanks for joining my Patreon family. Your support are very much appreciated. Same goes for everyone else in my Patreon family, of course. All your support are greatly appreciated. So welcome to the family, and if you have any questions, feel free to contact me on Patreon or email or Facebook. I'll definitely get back to you. So hope you enjoyed this video, and hope you have a better understanding on the metaphysical side of Taichi, as well as the controversy involving around Grandmaster Shi Ming. And hopefully in the next episode, we'll clarify even more on this topic. So thanks for watching TriEssence Martial Arts channel, and I'll see you next time.